The greatest leaders in business look for the emerging stories in their organization and use the data to choose their preferred outcome. What outcome do you want in your business? Listen to the stories of industry veterans, coaches, and consultants so you can choose your preferred business outcome. Hi, everyone. This is Vinay Raman with the next episode of the Business Blind Spots Exposed podcast. Thank you for joining. I'm really excited to have you here. And I'm actually really excited about this episode for a number of different reasons. I am really a big fan of shifting my mindset. Actually, I'm going to correct that. Someone gave me this word that I really love, heart set, shifting from a mindset to a heart set, being a heart-centric leader. And part of this whole discovery process for me has been this idea that I used to think I was a really smart guy and that's all that mattered. I just need to add more intelligence. Then I started to realize, gosh, there's this whole other world in front of me called my blind spots. Once I start to see them and understand them, I become better and I become greater. I have more impact on the world. And the way I increase my blind spots, or see my blind spots, I should say, is by getting the advice and perspectives of others. And that's what this podcast is all about. The idea of getting people who've been there, done that. They've got the cuts, bruises, and scars. They've got the perspective that I don't have to help me think and have the right heart set. So I want to stop for a moment and say, check in with our guest for today, Niha. Niha, how are you doing today?
Hi, Vinay. I'm doing great. I like hearing you talk about mindset versus heart set. So thanks for that. It's great to be here today.
Yeah, I'm really excited. And let me do a little bit of housekeeping before we get into a real conversation here with Niha, because I want to tell you some of the other episodes that are coming up here very shortly. And I'm going to be reading from my list. So I've got Mike Liana coming up, and the topic of our conversation is going to be employee buy-in equals process certainty equals higher business valuation. Not everybody wants to sell, but if you ever decide 15 to 20 years later that you may want to sell, guess what? The equity in your business has everything to do with how strong the process is. So a question, a litmus test is, can you take a vacation for 3 weeks and never be called once? If you can, that's a fantastic business, right? Mike's going to come and talk to us about how you build that process, which is what builds equity. That's what people want to buy, because that certain process doesn't include you, right? Next, Clay Hodges. We're going to talk about mindfulness to mentorship, how yoga led me to overcoming addiction and mentoring people. So I talked about this idea of mindset to heart set. There's a shift that's got to occur, and different people make the shift different ways because, look, their journeys are all different. But this idea of moving from this mindfulness and this mentorship, how you kind of shift into that mindset, how do you start to move to this heart set that allows you to lead people and to start to, I'll call it, unlock yourself, which is a really exciting place. It has been for me, and I'm still exploring. But today is Niha. Niha, the topic of our title today is the 5 things I know are true and leading with more clarity. Niha, that's a really interesting topic because there's lots of things that I think a lot of us believe are true, but there's 5 things that you're gonna tell us about today, which is that's really exciting stuff. Tell me about those five things.
Yeah, well, I think that a lot of times, to your point, we have become so accustomed to believing something because we were conditioned to thinking about it. So we're conditioned and we pick up things in our lives. You touched on this in a previous podcast, I know, about our upbringing. But so there's conditioning, and that could be either gender specific, or it could be other types of your expertise, the technical learnings that you take on through time. There's also cultural conditioning. So that's another one. And we tend to think, because we don't challenge them, that they're just inherent in who we are. And what happens is we tend to operate and make choices. So that's another one, from these beliefs of conditioning and cultural conditioning, and then we start to make choices that we are not aware of. So what happens then is we kind of come to a stage or point in our life and we look around and we're like, man, there's a lot on my plate. There's a lot going on. I'm not sure I'll even like my job. I definitely don't like my team. And then we start to think that these things all happened to us because we're taught to think that way. And what really becomes helpful is for us to shift into what I think is the most empowering part of what leaders can do is solve from a place of controllables. So that's the fourth one. And then we really think about how we want to create a foundation, a structure and process that brings an outcome that is intentional. So we shift from a place of conditioning, either culturally or from gender, from our technical expertise that we're trained when we go to school, and then from experiences after that. And we move into a place of choice. And from choice, we look at controllables, and then we set up a success system, which is what I do specifically with my clients, who are all director level, vice president, senior leaders and above in all different fields, from tech to medicine to law, corporate backgrounds. And then we build a success system that is driven to create results that are intentional based on choices and controllables.
I want to come back because I think there's a lot. Clearly, we've got a podcast about it because I think there's a lot to unpack there, right? And I want to kind of pull some of these things apart. But for everyone who's kind of listening in, I think you kind of already just got a first glimpse of Niha and why I wanted to have her on the podcast today. I want to tell you a little bit more about her first. So you'll start to see kind of where she came from and sort of her journey too, and to the point where we're on the podcast today and I get to spend a little bit of time with her. So I'm going to read a little bit of her background. So I love this part. Niha does coaching, and where she does that, it's on a mission to help leaders earn the money they deserve, do more of their genius work to transform their organizations and industries, eliminating wasted effort and stress while doing it. Gosh, what I'm hearing about is all these things, all this muddled mess that a lot of us have in our lives. Like, let's start to pull it apart and find out which actual threads and fibers actually matter to us. And there's so much noise in our lives. And that's part of what she does. And that's part of her mission. I also like this idea of this philosophy of building on the true compounding resource of your time and up-leveled problem-solving thinking and decision-making to create the best results faster. So not only talking about pulling apart that ball of spaghetti, if you will, but pulling out the threads in that ball of spaghetti that you can now start to focus and spend a time and attention to those things that matter the most, which make you much more not efficient. I mean, not about efficiency, but more about effectiveness, make you much more impactful and effective in what you do. So she's worked with VP, senior level decision makers, directors, as she said. It's all about increasing your ROI. She's worked with a number of CEOs and C-suite executives for large organizations, helped do strategic planning and streamline operations for them. She was the director of talent acquisition at Emory Healthcare in Atlanta, as the co-founder and chief operating officer at Pain and Wellness Solutions in Durham. She is former chair and senior board member for an international language immersion school. The evidence-based DEI principles is integrated into your philosophy. Just such a breadth of experience and perspective that has brought us to the point where we can have a conversation today. So I wanted to give you that a little bit of context as to who Niha was, just because when she's walking you through these 5 things, it's not just coming from I read in a book. It's coming from a lot of years of experience of maybe even having cried and gone through some of those pains. Is that a fair way to put that, Niha?
Yeah, well, I will say that I do have the benefit of having amazing mentors, people that from the tender ages that you get right out of school.
Mm-hmm.
I was lucky enough in being in a really rigorous business management program, and had the best professors there that drew out experience, but real life experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So when we studied in the classroom, the academic principles and theory, they melded that with us taking at the end of the semester. We were actually on a quarterly program. We would then go present to the senior leadership of our focus companies. So that really, really made things from a book become very real, because you had to dress up, do the analysis. If you were studying marketing, you had to go and tell them what was wrong with their marketing and make a presentation on what would be better. Chief marketing officer. Same thing with the CEO, same thing with the financial officer. You had to bring your A game.
Well, so this is super interesting to me, and for on a number of different reasons. So let's talk about this. So there's the mentor. There's a couple of different people in this process here.
Yeah.
There's the mentor. There's you, the person, the individual who's trying to grow, and then there's the person who is going to be the recipient of this insight that you're going to give. And you're this new person off the street for all intents and purposes, coming in, who's going to be understanding a topic over the course of 90 days, and you're going to go to the chief marketing officer and say, "So, I see some holes in the way you're thinking." I mean, gosh, that's got to be scary is probably a little bit of an underwhelming word for describing how that must have felt. But on the back end of that, after you've done that, and this person is receptive to it and has just listened to what you had to say, God, that must have made the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Is that a fair statement?
It was incredible. You know what? And you bring up a good point. I remember, and I'm still in touch with these classmates, and they've become so successful in their own right through time. But I remember one of them saying, we all felt so nervous because, and if you think about it, they had to clear off their schedule again and again for us to come in as students and make these presentations. And you and I both know what it's like to coordinate executive schedules within the C-suite. Yeah. So we would walk in, and I remember one of my classmates and buddies turning to me, and he said, Niha, I kept looking at you, and when you were in the audience, when you were done presenting and it was your turn to listen, he said, you were listening intently. I could look in your eyes. I knew that you were paying attention, and you nodded your head. And it's funny that we're having this conversation because umpteen years later, it's rushing to my head. So when I am in the boardroom, and I still am today, whether I'm leading or paying attention, I do try to make sure that I am the one that is intently listening as much as possible, because as much as you want to convey your thoughts, you're learning from what others are sharing, so that when it is your turn to speak, learn, grow, you've caught on to something that matters. And so, yeah, it was really scary to go in and tell experts in industry. You can see a parallel to what I'm still doing in my line of work today. But in industry, like, to use your words, the blind spot, the opportunity that may be because you're in the trenches, because you're in the weeds, because you're in the forest, you don't have that zoomed out perspective, and maybe those fresh eyes can really help drive a new perspective, much like the data and the analysis and the work that your company brings to an organization. And it's that fresh set of eyes that lets you see at ground level that can help streamline those operations, supercharge the mentality of your frontline managers to see new things, empower and increase their authority, so that they're tying the front end of day-to-day operations to strategic performance and financial results that matter. So you can see the stepping stones of where analysis and courage, insight, and having a bold voice matters to the day-to-day and to changing, sometimes even revolutionizing how we do business through our operations, through our policies, through our programs, and through our decisions today. We can do that in any part of our day when we choose to create time for it.
Gosh, Neha, I think you know me well enough. You've probably heard at least an analogy or two out of me before, 1,000. Um, I always love my sports analogies, military analogies. There's lots of them, and when I think of what I'm hearing from you, kind of playing back to you what I just heard, is if the coach of or let's take I can grew up in the DC metro area for a long time, so the Washington Football Club is someone that's through thick or thin I've kind of stood behind. I don't know why sometimes, but the general manager makes decisions sometimes that it seems a little short-sighted, and that's because they're not on the field playing. And it's not that it's denigrating their capability as the general manager of the Washington Football Club. Rather, it's about their ability it's about their visibility, right? Being able to go to the players and saying, "Hey, look, generally speaking, everybody else on the front line of all the other teams we play against, they're much bigger than us. We can't go toe to toe with them." And listening to that feedback from the ground is going to give you so much more insight as a leader, because at the end of the day, a leader is all about having the right perspective and asking the right questions so you can make the right decision. Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely. I think that is the way. Like, sometimes you want to ask yourself as a leader, and this is one of the things that I like to do right away on the onset of working with one of my clients, is getting a firmer sense for where your attention and your focus is going right now. So if I did a time audit, and sometimes that's the assignment that it's really essential for leaders to understand, is where am I spending my time, or on the other side of it, draining my time, my talents, and my efforts? What are the 15-minute increments that are comprising my hour, my half a day, and my full 8 to 12 hour work day? And where are they? And if you are constantly, as a leader, putting out fires, if you are responding to things reactively because it wasn't on your radar, or because somebody brought it to you and there wasn't strong boundaries or even gatekeeping of your time, of your calendar, you are not going to have an uncluttered brain by which to have the most proactive, long-term, solution-oriented. And I'm talking solution and process. You want to think of it as once and done. What can I do? And this goes back to the days that I was doing lean project work in hospitals, in the emergency department. And when you look at the system, much like they do in the airline industry, what is the exact process that is creating this backlog, that's creating this problem over and over and over? And sometimes it's purely, well, I didn't have enough time to address it. And sometimes it's the mindset, interestingly, maybe the heart set, to your point, where it's like, well, gosh, I just am really avoiding this. So we spend hours and hours tending to the other things, or being pulled reactively to contain a fire or an issue, instead of having time blocked, defended time, to use your football analogy, to kind of say, well, no, I'm going to look at the root cause here. The 1 or 2 or 3 problems that create 80% of the issues for me recurringly. I'm going to smooth that out. If I don't prioritize that, if I don't smooth it out once and for all, what's the real internal block? So we go back to controllables, and we go back to choices. What is preventing me from addressing this, speaking up, dealing with the problem employee, talking about the process, talking about the system, or maybe I haven't created it? And then you answer the question, or you lock yourself away. And I say 15-minute increments, and I don't say that lightly, because you can solve one of the biggest problems faced by you and your team by putting 2 blocks of 15 minutes together. And you'd be really surprised at how quickly the root answer will bubble up. And I'm not saying it's going to be the easiest solution, but it's going to be a solution that contributes to your ROI, contributes to the longevity of your team, the retention, the motivation, the inspiration, and the excitement, the enthusiasm that brings out your genius work, the work you were meant to do, your unique blend of talents that is your expertise combined with your training, combined with your credentials and your brain. When you put those things together, you have better solutions than you've ever attempted before. What's blocking you?
So, gosh, you're going to love my analogy here again. I think, when I used to run a lot, spend a lot of time playing sports when I was in high school and in college and things like that. And the coach used to always tell me, you got to stretch the muscles. And I finally asked one day why, because I didn't like stretching at all, like most, I think, teenage boys. And he told me the answer why. He said, look, your muscles are a bunch of fibers. And when you just start using them, they kind of start to get bound up, right? You stretch them so that the actual individual fibers start to line up nicely so that they actually operate more effectively and efficiently. So you get more range out of the muscle, you get more strength out of the muscle. And what I'm hearing from you here is just this idea that, gosh, you get so bound up in everything and you get all tightened up like a ball. I mean, that's what happens to your muscles, right? But if you actually start to use like a mind, like the muscle, and you start to pull it out and you start to stretch it out, and all of a sudden it becomes more effective. Does that resonate?
You're absolutely hitting the nail on the head. We are essentially taking the clutter out of our brain and creating space for focus that up levels the way. And the three things that I do with my clients, I think are absolutely essential: decision making, and the filtering process to do them more efficiently with better results and without beating yourself up when things happen, without changing course, when things arise. It's like that mental discipline, which you could say is a muscle, that physical, that discipline that you create for yourself is a learned technique. And then you want to be able to create a system that allows you to solve problems in a new and different way that is innovative and systematic.
So give me that again. So you said there's three things. There's decision making was the first one. I didn't capture the other two.
Decision making is the first one. Up-leveled problem solving is the second one. Really sitting down and allowing yourself to have the mental proactiveness to create a new solution that actually works. That's not a Band-Aid and that's not reactive.
And what was number three?
And the third one is going to be the evaluation process that you use after things are done and put into execution, where you isolate any individual changes and make only one change at a time. So that scientific method is very applicable here, because you're going to get better results when you make quicker decisions and you don't beat yourself up or make changes when things go awry. And you're going to be creating better solutions by which to put into execution and then evaluation and make one change at a time. We often are like so quick to change many multiple things that we get overwhelmed again. It causes self-doubt and confusion, and it doesn't allow you to really let something play out and evaluate it strongly to only make one change at a time for better results.
So, gosh, as soon as you say this is exactly, I mean, this is the thought that ran through my head as you said that. So many times I hear people say, I've got too much on my to-do list. And what I'm hearing from you is, all right, well, let's not focus on getting more things done. Rather, you got too many things on your to-do list.
100%. And that's another thing.
Let's focus on the 8 things that you're fabulous at and get the rest of the stuff to somebody else. Right?
Eliminate it. And so that's what's going to be really surprising when people start this work with me. And I'm like, what we're going to actually do, and I try to make it really clear, in my external communication, my outbound communication, when people sign up to do this work with me, like, we're going to work to bring you to a place of calm and relief first. We're going to bring you to neutral. Because people are like, well, I want to go from totally overwhelmed and frazzled and having so much on my plate to immediately like super performance. I mean, I'm absolutely going to get you to super performance. I just did a webinar on it last month, but I'm going to get you to neutral first and then go to super performance. And it's absolutely going to happen, but it's going to happen through elimination, focus, and up leveling, not through adding textbook theories, more books on your plate to read, more actions. It's not going to be more doing. It is, who do I want to be? And taking action from that concept while you're also improving your relationship with your belief in yourself, which is what directly impacts confidence, clarity, bold, courageous decision-making, and then standing up for what you believe, which for a lot of individuals that are new leaders, new to leadership, newly promoted, women are underrepresented at higher and higher ranks, that concentration of their voice and power is critical to really being in the boardroom, saying what you mean to senior leadership, and then meaning what you say, which means backing it up time and time again, because you know the reasons why you said what you said, and you're going to stand by it. You didn't make it willy-nilly. It wasn't reactive. It wasn't to put a fire out. It wasn't a Band-Aid. It was dealing with the root.
It was a commitment from. So here, a couple of things I want to do here, just based on what I've heard, and also I want people, as they're listening to this, please chime in, please add comments, whether you're listening to it live or you're listening to a replay. I'd love to get those answers, get the answers to those questions. I'd love to hear what the questions are. Get them to Niha, or if I can help, I'd love to be able to help clarify and see if there's a larger, maybe pull that and stretch that muscle out a little bit, right? The question that you ask. So that's number one. Please feel free to add comments and ask us questions. Tell us if you're agreeing, you're disagreeing. That might be just a perspective shift in terms of how you see it. That's number one. Number two is, the thing that came up to me was this idea of, if you're trying to, a lot of people say, I want to support others. I mean, that's what a lot of people say. I'm here to support others. And I believe that in and of itself is a noble intent. But try to just go home today, and your spouse, your friend, your next door neighbor, whatever the case may be, say, hey, look, I want to lift you up so I can raise you up to the next level, but stand on one leg and do it. I might suggest it's a lot harder to do that when you're standing on one leg as opposed to two legs. And the analogy of what I'm hearing here is, Niha, a lot of people are standing on one leg and trying to do a two-legged race, when in fact, you're trying to bring them back to grounding themselves, where they're putting both feet on the ground and they can stay firm, solid, confident with self-worth. Now you can start to help people in a much more effective way because you're standing on solid ground. Is that a fair way to paint that picture?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the idea of being on one leg versus two, trying to run a two-legged race, or having your hands tied behind your back, trying to hit tail on the donkey, whatever that game is, with the blindfold on, and you're doing that all day long. I mean, that's exhausting. Yeah. So what you really want to do is get yourself to a place. Most people, are working from a space of overwhelm, having too many things on their plate. And then the time and the modern way that we live our lives, and kudos to that, is that we come home and we all have a lot of responsibilities on our plates. There's not just that one person, unless you've purposefully gone out of your way and created the structure in your home to have those additional resources. And if you have that, that is really commendable. You want to do whatever you can to get little things off of your plate. And sometimes that added bit of forethought and investing in
looks like we may have lost Niha. Yeah, there you are. You're back again.
People often think that their greatest resource is money. And that's really not true, because money can always be created again, but time cannot. Yeah. So if you can take things off of your plate and invest in people to help you, you've essentially created what is most valuable. And so you absolutely want to also think of your brain that way. Think of yourself as the asset. If you are depleting yourself and your brain and the skills and the resources because you are not investing in yourself, you're not rested, you're not feeling healthy, And, emotionally, you might be feeling like, you never make the right decision. This could be like a circular thought going on in your brain. I don't know. I don't make the right decision. You're second guessing yourself. You're feeling self-doubt. And so that can show up in the results that you're driving, because you create and own your results as much as we're conditioned to believe that it's the external, it's my organization, it's my boss, it's my industry. You're driving your results, whether you're aware of it or not.
So here's what I'm hearing there, right? Is that lots of times, and I feel like I've gone through this transformation over and over again. I mean, it's a continued process. It hasn't been a one-time experience for me. But I used to think I'm kind of the phrase, square peg, round hole kind of thing. When in fact, why am I trying to fit into a round hole if I'm a square peg? It's okay to be the square peg, right? Absolutely. There may be some connotations with it. That doesn't matter. That has nothing. I'm a square peg. So I'm starting to go look for square holes or square cutouts, not for round holes, because that's not what I am. And I think what I'm hearing from you is getting comfortable in the ownership of the fact that you are the square peg and not meant to be fitting in the square hole, the round hole, because you could spend your whole life. I mean, Einstein said, if you teach everyone that in order to be successful, they need to be able to walk on land and climb up trees, well, a fish will never be successful and will always think it's a failure for the rest of its life. Well, just figure out where you are and what your genius is, and what you uniquely bring to the value in terms of your time, because that's where you're actually going to have the most amplification and impact in what you can do. Is that a fair way to state that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I work with really high achieving professionals.
Okay.
And so in that category, what's really happened there is that there was a point in time early on in the timeline when those individuals did things purely for the joy, purely because they were good at it, purely because it caught their attention. And they're just focused, head down, getting things done. And then other people noticed, oh gosh, you're, like people like to do, they try to put you into a hole, try to force fit you somewhere. And then at some point you glance up and you notice that people are referencing or talking about it. And then you shift from doing the work that you're naturally compelled to do from a place of talent, and you shift over time into performance. That performance then changes into a strong external culture of being evaluated. And then we respond by then needing validation. And that's not really how we were operating to begin with.
Yeah.
So then we shift and self-select ourselves into really demanding fields, and then organizations, and then even more narrowly into roles. We think it all happened to us, and we were lucky to be a part of the process. None of that's true. Nothing happened because of luck. It happened because of sacrifices you made, talents you have, things you drove, things that you put into motion. People around you may have supported you, invested in you. You might have had great mentors, great family structure, great parents that gave you resources, but you then took the ball and you ran with it. Yeah. You did something with it. And what we want to be very aware of is where self-doubt, where lack shows up in our life. And that means we got to be really careful and a little quiet and listen to that cycle in our brain. Where are we being self-deprecating and thinking it's a joke? Thinking it's like funny? Where are we kind of telling ourselves, oh, I always do this. I always mess so-and-so thing up. I don't do this right. I'm not good at this. Where do we feed that belief? Because, as humans, we have agency. We are lucky because we live in the Western world. So as adults in the Western world, we have a lot more choice. And we live in a capitalistic society. So we can start a business from our brain, literally something out of nothing. And we're permitted to do that, and it can flourish and grow into something amazing. I like to take the best of the best, so my clients, and I like to create so much space and time in their brain and in their life that they're actually able to choose something that's really important to them and give back to their community, give back to their neighborhoods, give back to their schools, give back, so that the best and the brightest are really being a vibrant investor, not only in money, but sometimes in, again, the greatest asset we have, time, to build and develop. Because when you have really thriving communities with citizens that are giving back, everybody benefits, everybody elevates. And so it's really important for us to understand, where do we hold ourselves back because we got in such a reactive performance mode where we're seeking external evaluation, external validation before we take action, before we make strong and bold decisions. What's holding ourselves back? And that's really the key to then creating a strong platform that is able to be repeated over and over and over, that then really makes you more effective, more efficient, a stronger communicator, because you're making decisions that you believe in, that matter to you and your team and your organization, and creating better and better results. That skyrockets your confidence.
So I love this stuff, and the reason why is because I feel like I've gone through this journey myself in terms of starting to stop those talk tracks in my head that I am right. No, I'm waiting to find out. is kind of the way it changed, right? But I want to bring us to something where I think we can. I want to give people the opportunity to kind of see how you think and process some of these situations, right? And we've talked about this idea that I've got some graphs that will show an organization, and I'd like to talk through those graphs a little bit to show you kind of what's happening in the dynamic of an organization. And why I want to do this is, I'll be the first to admit I love physics as a concept, as a class. Still in love with physics. But when I start to see it in action, they talked about the elastic and inelastic collisions between two bowling balls or two billiard balls. That was nice and neat, and I figured out all those vectors. But when I went and I saw it actually in action, I was like, wow, that's really cool, because now I understand how it works, and just so much opened up for me. So I'd like to invite you to do a little bit of a open session with me where we walk through this, and I'd love to hear how you think through this, and from 2 points of view. Number one, as a leader, right? When we talk through this, what are you seeing is kind of happening in the mentality of that leadership, right? And what is it that's kind of maybe what I'll call it the glass ceiling or the glass wall, because it's not always necessarily above you. It could be right in front of you too. The glass wall that's holding you back. Is that a fair
yeah,
thing to do?
Sounds good.
Give me a moment here. I'd like to share my screen with you, and I'm going to do that here. All right. You should now be able to see.
Mm-hmm.
I've got this technician named Dan, and I've got a couple of them here. I'm actually going to pick a random one. So we've got Dan and his thing. I'm going to pick. Is there a particular one that you thought was interesting? Because all of them have kind of got slightly different stories.
I remembered Nick. I was looking at Nick.
All right, let's go to Nick. All right, so
yeah.
So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna spend like 2 or 3 minutes just kind of walking through what this is, and I'd love to hear what you hear here. Okay, so I'm gonna zoom in a little bit just so we can see it. So this idea is that we've got this person named Nick, who's we call it just a paycheck. Someone who's just kind of showing up at this organization for a paycheck. They've been in this technician role for 8 years. They've been at this particular company for 7. They've been both a trainer and leader for others in the company. And they kind of question the motives of this company. So they've been around for a little while. They've kind of been there and done that a few times over. And they're now starting to question the motives of the company because I'll call it, they've gotten a little jaded. I know it's happened to me before. And what I want to do is show you this graph of this employee's performance. So let me explain this graph. And I want to kind of hear what you hear after this, right? So the scale here you see in the middle, it's 0 at the center to 100 on the outside. So think of, for anyone who's listening in, think of this test that you used to get in school, right? It's all graded on a curve. We used to talk about all that stuff. You get a 0, you get 100, and hopefully you'll get an A+ on everything. The 100 is the A+, right? So going out to the edges is getting an A+. Going to the center to a dot in the middle means you got a 0 and you kind of either missed the test or you completely failed it, right? So what we've done here is we've taken this idea that 80%, this green line here, is getting an 80%, right, on the test. So you got a B or better. We would like all employees to be at a B or better, because if they're getting a B or better, they're showing some reasonable degree of competence in understanding. And we've got multiple different dimensions that we're measuring them on. Actual stops means how many times they're starting to see customers, production per hour, how much revenue they're making per hour, production per mile. If in this case, it happens to be a company where they're driving to see their customers, they could be just on the phones, or they could be doing conversations over the wire. If it was a sales type role. Safe acceleration braking. Again, this was a company that uses vehicles. So there's some driver behavior attributes. These KPIs, these performance indicators, can be really anything that you want it to be. But what's happening here is this blue area presents how Nick is showing up against those standards. This red area in the middle, you don't want to be there. That's folks who are not excelling in the role. So you can see this place like safe acceleration. That's something that Nick is doing really well. Safe braking, she's doing about average, but there's some support needed in some of these other areas. I want to stop for a second. Niha, what's kind of coming up for you? What are you seeing? Oh, is there a story that's emerging for you here?
Well, I mean, the first thing that I can see based on how close she is to the red is that she is a disengaged employee. Mm-hmm. And it's loud and clear. Productivity is really low on all the measures that indicate, the level of effort and interest and output that she's willingly wanting to put forth is low and concerning. So that's a red flag. Where you see its highest is safe acceleration, which is really, that's just something she's trained to do. That's automatic.
Yeah.
So she's doing that because, she's used to being that way. It's her safety. It's her protection mechanism. Of course, she's going to do that. And that's also conditioning, going back to that, of her gender. I think that that's just typical of that. But it's concerning because you can tell that she's able to perform. She's able to be conscientious and have awareness and have focus. She's not distracted. She's disengaged.
So let's shift the script back to kind of leadership, right? Because this is an employee that may be working for you. As a leader, I might look at this and the first inclination is, God, what a waste of my time. This person is just kind of sucking up the oxygen in the room, and they're using time. When in fact, I think there's an opportunity to potentially augment or assist somebody, especially someone who's been here for 7 years at the company. They've taken a lot of time and effort. As a leader, I could also take a look at this and say, gosh, I'm just failing here. This is terrible. How am I letting this occur? Based on what you've been saying to me, I think there might be a different perspective to look at this and kind of flip the script. Would you agree? And is that kind of what comes to mind for you?
Completely. That very, very clearly. So one of the things that I see here is, instead of kind of going to this knee-jerk response as a leader, what am I doing wrong? This is all my fault. I've done something here. Instead of that internal dialogue, mm-hmm. which is just a patterning, again, conditioning, you want to go to where you are empowered, where you can make impact. And it's, what are my controllables here? Yep. And you want to ask yourself, what are my cycles of communication that I have used to create more clarity, to create more understanding on the part of this employee? The telltale sign here is that she's been at the company for 7 years. Mm-hmm. And so we could even call her just a paycheck, but I think that that's a true oversimplification in the mind of the leader, because nobody stays at a company for 7 years because it's just a paycheck.
Agreed.
There is an expectation. There is a desire. There has been a strong alignment at some point. So remember, my background is in strategic planning,
Yep.
long-term thinking, and long-term growth for a company and for leaders. And so in that case, you have to say, well, she's been here 7 years. So where did we miss an opportunity? Where are the controllables right now? See, the beauty of this work is that you can create change in a nanosecond that is permanent and lasts forever when you have better information, when you make better choices. So I could call her up today if I had the time, if I made the time on my schedule to connect with my employees on a regular basis and check in on her and strengthen that relationship, that connection, back to what you said at the top, that heart-centered conversation. And we don't want to blame the employee, and we don't want to blame ourselves as management, because that is just a waste of time.
Yeah, it's ineffective.
It is a drain, and it's tiring. But we can create better cycles of communication that are linked with clarity to the long-term growth objectives and to developing our people so that they can see a clearer path towards growth and towards promotion within the organization, which I think is lacking here.
So I'm going to stop sharing for a little bit because I'd like to kind of keep going down this thread a little bit here. And really what I wanted to do is I kind of reflect back a little bit of what I heard here is right. So when people start seeing some of these stats and numbers, they feel like they've got to be on top of everything all the time. I mean, I feel like that's kind of back to that standing on one leg kind of thing, or sort of one hand time behind your back. You're just constantly taking fire, right? People are constantly throwing spears at you. For a little while, just push it off to a side and say, that's not what I care about, right? Looking at this employee here, say, all right, so I can either choose one of two paths here potentially, right? Oh, this is coming to an end. This is my fault. All right, let me cut my losses. Let's go find a new person. Gosh, that takes a long time. We know that's a really expensive process for every organization. So then the other path is to say, all right, let me stop for a moment and stop pointing fingers at everybody and worrying about who's to blame here. It's not about that. That's really just kind of ineffective. Let's shift the perspective. Let's shift the narrative to start. All right, so what steps can we take going forward here to make it better for both of us? And by having this information, this graph here, it can tell us, we saw that actual stops made and production per hour are things that she needs some specific assistance on, or, that Nick needs assistance on. Well, then I can say, all right, I don't have to spend time doing everything under the moon. I just need to focus on those two things with Nick. And we should start to see some progress. And you may or may not, but now you know that you spent time very effectively, intentionally, to get the impact that you want. Did I say that right? Am I getting that all together?
You got it. You're a very quick learner. Maybe you're very good at what you do. I think that's what it is, the latter. But that's exactly right, is that you get to then say, back to what we were talking about earlier, where am I spending my time and how can I do things as simply as possible? So it's kind of a couple things here. Number one, where are my controllables that I can 80 for the 20 solve problems across the system? Yep. You want to be asking yourself, where am I spending or wasting my time? Where is my focus? On the other side of that, where am I distracted? And if I want to show my commitment to Nick and all of my employees, which in most organizations, it is always going to be your highest expense, or in other words, investment, if you really think about it the right way. So you want to be making sure that you're developing and investing in your people and in their growth. And this is, again, not the textbook. We're not talking about that, but we're talking about true principles of picking up the phone or meeting her on her route, maybe with maybe a cup of coffee. Like, where do you really, especially if you're a smaller company and you're growing and you want to scale, this is the kind of answers you want to be solving for with this kind of insightful data, because it is creating a big picture about how the front end is or is not connecting with the back end and the long-term strategy. What I'm also wondering is, where are you putting your resources right now? Because you're distracted as a senior leader. You're putting it into something else. What is that? If it's growth in some other way, that's not focused on your biggest expense, which are your people, which are the biggest factor for your ROI for your company, you are going to be missing the mark significantly when you try to scale, when you try to grow.
So the question that comes to mind, right? I'm always trying to play sort of the devil's advocate, or kind of try to understand the other side of the conversation, right? Because I'm always trying to challenge what I understand and what I believe. And the question that comes to mind is, so what would someone on the other side of the fence say here? So I believe everything that Niha is saying. I'm hopping to the other side of the fence and I say, this is all fluff and sizzle, right? It's nothing. This doesn't work all the time. Is that even a relevant question? Saying, hey, does this work all the time? Will this approach and shift in mindset, does it work all the time?
It works all the time, 100%, because
Why?
we are humans. We
Okay.
are humans, and our brain is our computer. Our brain is our device. So the way that you are filtering, so imagine the difference between, making a, cup of coffee with a filter that has a bunch of holes in it and all the grounds are getting through, versus one that you've purposefully, intentionally selected to have really, really fine mesh.
Yeah.
And you've intentionally selected it, utilized it, placed it over the cup, and put the element through it. You're going to have a finer cup of coffee, a better tasting, better cup end result. If you're not intentional and, you use a cheesecloth or anything that you have, you're just going to create a mess. So how you're thinking and utilizing data. So I have a strong background in evidence-based training, evidence-based decision-making, evidence-based medicine. And so data is going to be the powerful tool that allows you to make the best decisions. You don't want to get overly lost in analytics. You want to use them as simply as possible to make better actionable decisions. So behavioral decisions. So you can ask yourself, is this how I want to be thinking about this for the rest of my life? Do I want to make decisions from a place of, I don't really, I'm not really sure what to do. Yeah. To fix, blindfolded. I'm not really sure what to do with this employee. Or do you want to sit down for a minute and just believe in yourself? Do you, number one, I say this to my clients, do you speak English? Or in other words, I work with international clients as well. Do you speak the language that the person you're speaking with speaks? Okay, check. Do you have, confidence? You want to go to the basic principles. Then you have to have the conversation. If you know that you speak the same language, you start there.
Yeah.
And you ask Nick, you get to the point where you say, I don't want to just throw the whole thing out. She's been here for a reason. She's stayed on for a reason. How can I fix this? The solution will arise in your own brain if you listen to it, if you engage your own brain instead of seeking externally. And sometimes that's how mindset and understanding what you have right in front of you creates a better solution.
So we're coming toward the tail end of the hour, and I feel like this has flown by, and the conversation will probably get go for another hour and a half. Kind of the way we're going here. I want to come back and summarize a couple of things that I heard from you, just to make sure that people who are listening in to either live or into the replay, that they get a chance to digest some of this stuff and kind of bring this back. And I will tell you at the end, when we do put this out, you'll be able to get all of Niha's contact information should you have any questions for her and want to reach out to her, or I'll be more than happy to connect you with her. So there's a 3-step process that I heard about: decision-making, moving to up-level problem solving, and then evaluation of effectiveness of the outcomes. There was the 5 things that I know that are true. So I actually I wrote down 6 of them. So I want to figure out which one I got, which ones are the right ones. So I heard controllables, I heard choices, I heard culture. Is that right?
Yeah.
Culture, gender. Was that one of them?
So we want to think about it as there's culture and there's conditioning. We want to be aware those are impacting our choices.
Okay.
And once we have that awareness, we want to really understand our controllables.
So, okay, solve from control. Okay.
Solve from controllables and then create strategic processes and systems that can be repeated over and over, much like the conversation you're going to have in the upcoming podcast, because that does increase the valuation of your company, because you can walk away. I want my clients to be able to step away from their company for a series of days and have it so systematic and be led from such a strong vision, mission, and value, personal and organizational, that things are still flying. Rest assured, you are away and things are still growing and scaling.
So, all right. So I got strategic processes, conditioning, culture, choices, and your control, understanding your controllables. Now, if somebody likes what they've been hearing from you, Niha, they want to start taking the right steps forward. Give me, 1, 2, or 3 things. What are the first couple of things that you would suggest that they do, or start to? I always find everything's all about asking the right questions. What are the first 3 questions they should start asking of themselves?
Yeah. So I always say, grab a cup of coffee, grab a cup of tea, because you can make monumental change in your life over a steaming cup. The amount of time that it takes you to drink it is enough of an investment in yourself that will create some big changes. Okay. So first question you want to ask yourself is, where do I want to be in 1 year? That's the simplistic form. And some of the work that I do more deeply is, let's talk about 25 years. Mm-hmm. And why we ask that question is because it taps into the heart. It taps into dreams. It taps into possibility and our childhood greatness. We want to reconnect with that, because that will lead us to our genius work and really soaring at what we do best, which is a unique blend of what we do. You want to also ask yourself why. It's not enough just to say, hey, I want to go on that vacation, because that's too superficial. That's not deep enough. You want to know why you want that goal. There is a little bit of deeper work that can come to the surface that will help anchor the reason why you'll spend time away from your family, the reason why you'll get on the airline and fly and go do this thing. And when times get tough, you can rely on that anchor. And you want to make sure that you are creating a strategy and a support structure. Sometimes we want it all to come from, just the organization, or we believe it's all outsourced to our boss to create success for ourselves. And I don't believe in that at all. It's a complete lifestyle. It's your friends, it's a coach, it's allies, a mentor, and selecting an organization that reflects your values and your belief. And you want to make sure that you're connecting meaningfully within your industry, that you're really having deep, regular conversations with people that you value and respect, and that you're continuing, because that's where new opportunities come. That's where the startup opportunity, that CEO position, that's where that kind of thing comes from, where you're top of mind. So you never want to stop thinking about how to be a thought leader in your industry. And you want to remember, you have a unique blend of talents that people need and want. And that can be a source of genuine conversation. And ultimately, you want to lead with your personal and organizational and team mission, vision, and value, so that you are connecting at a really authentic. People don't like the word networking. Well, that's because you want to really think about it as connecting deeply and very intently with people that are like-minded. And when you do that, you really create a reputation for excellence. People are drawn to you. You draw out the best work. You have more authority in the longevity of your career. You are given more responsibility, and you're rewarded for it in terms of flexibility, decision-making, better teams that you're working with, so that you really are writing your own ticket in the long term for your career, so that you have the time to give back to your community and really do your best life's work.
Niha, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
You can send me an email at niha@nihacoaching.com. So that's NIHA at nihacoaching.com. Drop me a line there, ask questions. We do a lot of interesting work, host webinars. You can sign up to have a conversation with me and check the fit between the two of us and get started on doing this work right away.
Well, I hope for anybody who's been listening in and that you've gotten something out of this. I feel like there's a lot of nuggets in here. We went through the graphs just really kind of so you could see kind of how Niha thinks about leadership and management in just in a different way. Because for me, I found it's all about just shifting your perspective, just taking 2 steps to the right, all of a sudden gives you a different perspective on what you couldn't see before. And I think that's what Niha does a lot of here is helps you shift that perspective. So you're standing on 2 legs, not one. So thank you for listening in. I hope you have gotten some really good nuggets out of it. Feel free to ask questions and post them. I'll make sure to get them to Niha if that's what you'd like. Thank you, everyone. And finally, Niha, thank you so much for spending so much time with us.
Thank you, Vinay. It was a pleasure to be here today.
Absolutely. We'd love to have you.